Our job as interviewers is to figure out who is going to be the best fit. We're not trying to find the same person over and over and over again. So you may sound different than the others. It's complementing each other. That really is the strength of a team. Not having all the same strengths, but diversifying the strengths of our team because everybody offers something unique.
Finding the best fit for a team is not an easy task. That's Mr. Timothy James Sweet. He's been called TJ since he can remember, and he's an obvious first pick for your softball team, as well as a man who knows how to wear a beard. TJ has the job of building teams made from people with significant, diverse backgrounds and educational experiences. How does he do it? What does he look for in interviews? TJ has some great advice for anyone looking to land their career, and it all starts with mindset and how a person presents themselves during that first interview conversation.
If you're in that room, you clearly are pursuing the job, but having the candidates be in the mindset of, I really don't want to do what I'm currently doing, or I really want to do what I'm interviewing for. That I can pick up on by the way they respond, by the way the energy in their face, whether they smile when I ask them questions, things like that.
You're listening to Glass of Water, where we reverse the role of the interviewer and the interviewee. The goal of this podcast is to pull back the curtain on the hiring process and give you some insights that equip you to land that career you want, rather than just some job you have. As is always the case, if you enjoy what you hear, please take the time to subscribe and give us a rating. Today I'm joined by a colleague of mine, Timothy James. He goes by TJ though. Thanks for joining me today, TJ.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
So TJ, tell me a little about what you do. I mean, what job do you have? What's your role? Fill me in.
So I am a practice manager at MU Healthcare, and I get the opportunity to work at Ellis Fischel Cancer Center. And I get to work with a team that helps screening and educating patients for cancer, and then also the diagnosis and the treatment aspects of cancer as well.
That sounds like a pretty big deal.
It is a big deal, and the team that I get to work with is fantastic, and they are literally saving and improving lives every single day.
So I'm guessing that the type of people you have on that team matters, right?
Absolutely. The attitude and the heart and the mindset of the team members is probably one of the most important things that we offer as a group.
Yeah, and offer your patients too.
Absolutely. The patients inspire us as much as we inspire them, but they need us to be strong and like-minded and good-hearted and focused on them throughout their entire process of whether it's screening to diagnosis to treatment of their cancer, yeah.
Yeah, because if you have somebody on your team, that doesn't play well with others or is having a bad day, just one person having a bad day when you're in that kind of really hard environment can change the whole vibe of how patients are getting better and the vibe of the team too.
Yeah, in all of healthcare, really, the patients really come to us in a pretty vulnerable state. And so they need us to be pretty calm, cool, collected. And we build trust with the patients by being great at listening and in the space with them whenever we have the opportunity to be with them. And so as providers of serving these patients, we can't really be too lost in kind of a quote unquote, if you will, bad day, because we realize that the patients are really having kind of a worse day.
So in your role as practice manager, you're involved in the hiring process too, right?
Yes, I get the opportunity to hire and obviously interview for all of our staff.
Yeah, so you're not just hiring somebody at an entry-level position. You're also talking to people in maybe upper-level positions too?
Yeah, so I get the opportunity to interview physicians and physicists and people with PhDs who are very well trained and very well skilled, who come from some of the top academic centers and the top hospital systems across the nation.
Right, and then you also might interview somebody that has a different kind of degree.
Yeah, we interview some people who are just getting out of high school and really want to get into the healthcare field and they have a passion for people. And we also interview people who literally just graduated college with their degree.
Well, you have an interesting story too, don't you, about how you even got interested in this field?
Yeah, so I was 14 years old and playing soccer, 3 different soccer teams at the time, and just an innocent play while I was running on the field. I did a typical slide tackle, and I ended up tearing my meniscus in my knee, the cartilage in my knee. And I had the opportunity, obviously, then to meet with an orthopedic surgeon. And at 14 years old, I was more intrigued by what he was doing as far as the MRIs, the imaging, the testing, and all of that. And then whenever I got the opportunity to sit down and talk to him while he was talking to me about my plan, because I had 2 knee surgeries when I was 14 years old, and I had to go through multiple surgeries and go through multiple rehabs and all that. And so that's really what kind of got me interested in healthcare, was just being a patient first. And then I realized that I wanted to help other people in that way.
So did you go to school specifically with that thought in mind? Like, I'm going to college and I want to go into healthcare.
Absolutely. I knew from the age of 14 that I was going to be in healthcare. I knew that I wanted to, my plan originally was to be a physician. It'd be an orthopedic surgeon, and then it shifted as I was through my collegiate years to be a radiologist. And then as I got to meet more surgeons and more radiologists, I realized that I kind of wanted to go into the leadership route and go that track, and then go into healthcare leadership.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about what it takes to put together a good team. How do you hire people? You know, what do you look for in the hiring process? So I guess maybe my first question for you, TJ, is this. When that person walks through the door for the interview, what is the top thing you're looking for from that person?
So the most important thing that we look for is really the mindset at this point, attitude and mindset, because we know if they walk through the door, they already checked all the other boxes. Our HR team does an incredible job of making sure that they send us the right people to at least look at as far as skill set. And then our job as a department is to try to figure out on our team what type of mindset do we want that fits into our culture.
Yeah, that sounds like not an easy task. Like, how do you figure out in 30 minutes, 60 minutes, maybe even 90 minutes an interview? How do you figure out the mindset of somebody?
So we do a lot of different things, and I ask a lot of questions during the interview process. I actually really enjoy those moments of getting to know the real person, because again, I'm not going to ask them what their strengths and weaknesses are. I'm going to ask them like how they would actually respond to a certain situation. And one of the number one questions that I ask that gets the most thought is, are you an optimist or a pessimist, and what does that look like in your day-to-day job?
Do you find that people will just be like, well, I'm an optimist? Do they actually think through it? How do they process that and actually deliver you a quality answer?
So you can see the deep thought that happens whenever they get to answering that question, because they feel like the right answer is optimist. Because they can also feel my energy coming to them. They can tell that I'm a positive, like forward looking, I'm always smiling, so they feel like the right answer is optimist. But what they struggle with is, how does that actually show up in their work life, in their personal life, in any way? And I've actually had some people say, I'm neither, I'm a realist. Of which then obviously I have follow-up questions for, right? Of like, what does that actually look like, right? Because again, I'm not looking for an answer, I'm just asking a question. Even if somebody says they're pessimistic, great, tell me about what that looks like, you know? And so most of the people will say optimistic, but having them actually describe how their optimism shows up in a day is tougher for them, you know? But that's also kind of the point of the question too, is in the sense of like, our days are never the same. We can't anticipate everything in our day. But the idea of optimism as well, and I give them a definition of the idea of optimism just so that they have a sense of kind of what I'm looking for, is really just the ability to affect an outcome. Not that everything's sunshines and rainbows, because it's not, and especially in healthcare, most of the time, people are struggling and people need us, and it's hard to see that. But if they can articulate that they feel like they have the ability to actually positively influence our patients, that is paramount.
So I think that some people feel they have to give an answer quickly. It's like, oh, I if I don't have an answer right off the top of my head, then it's a negative. But it's actually, would you say it's better to give them a chance and some space to think about how they want to respond?
Absolutely. I think we try to fill that space for candidates sometimes as the interviewer because we don't want to quote unquote make them feel uncomfortable. And I don't think that that's really doing the candidate justice because if we keep filling it with more noise, they can't think clearly. And so they give us time, right, to ask the questions, and they give us the silence. They don't start, interrupting or doing anything that we're doing. And so doing that back, and that actually shows that I'm interested in your response more than I'm interested in asking you more questions.
Right. So silence is okay during the interview process. Let the wheels spin a little bit so you can actually think about the type of response you want to give.
Yeah, and one thing that's important about that silence is just the simple fact of I'm asking a question because I want to learn something about the person. I'm not asking the question to try to figure people out. So if I don't feel like I'm getting the answer I want, asking more questions doesn't help me learn anything about that person because I'm not giving them a chance to actually answer it.
Right. So you said one of the most important characteristics that you're looking for from anyone that comes through your door is mindset. Can you describe mindset to me a little bit?
So mindset is how they think about the work that they're doing and how they think about the people that they get to serve and the people they get to serve with. So some of it is engagement in the sense of do they understand the value? Are they really focusing on serving? Are they focusing on recognizing how they impact their team? And that mindset of we, right, is very, very different than the mindset of me. Finding that person that understands that they are there for a purpose, to serve a purpose for the team, to serve a purpose for the patient. That is a mindset. That person's willing to do what they need to do in order to get that work done or whatever it may be to serve that patient. And they're not responding to stress in the same way because they understand, again, they're focusing on the purpose more than, kind of the tasks.
When you have people come to you and are responding to questions, and you're asking your questions, obviously, like optimism and pessimism, how often do you get like one-word responses to the question you ask? How then do you get to draw out information from that candidate so they're not just giving you pat one-word responses?
So whenever they give that one-word response, I'll ask them a question. I don't say expand on that, right? Because that's not giving them any direction. And so I say, okay, great. So you're an optimist. So tell me about on a busy work day or on a team that you've been on or at that previous job. I'll reference the job they've had or in college or whatever. I'll ask them, so what is that, so I'll actually kind of like feed them a question that they can't just give me a one-word response to.
Yeah, so an open-ended question tied to some of the content you already know about that individual. So real behavioral-based interview questions. Do you find that, certain candidates are better at those behavioral-based questions than others?
Yeah, there are definitely some differences, so like we mentioned, so some of the physicians and PhDs and the physicists, they have just kind of a different mindset in the sense that they're high-level professionals, that they're very focused on what they're doing, and sometimes relating's not one of their most favorite to be a great relator, but we all have to be good communicators.
Right.
And so draw that out of them is important for us to do during that interview process because that person will then have to communicate to us and to their peers and to everybody else. And if we recognize that somebody's not a great communicator of their thoughts or a good listener, that's where we struggle a little bit with this simple communication within a team.
What are some of the misconceptions you think candidates have about that hiring process before they come to you?
Probably the most common misconception that people have is that we are looking at the skills that they have and that their resume matches everything and that we're just going to call references. They come in with some stock answers because right now these days as interviewers, we're aware that the candidates can Google what are the most common questions. They can Google behavior-based questions. So they come in and they actually ask, well, aren't you going to ask me about, my process improvement experiences? Or aren't you going to ask me about what a great team looks like? Or they come in with this already prepared staged answer. And that's definitely not what's going to happen in most places these days.
Wow. So candidates can be way more informed than they could in the past.
Absolutely. And it's good information. It's great information, actually. We want people to be able to think on their feet a little bit, not to be challenging, but just because the job that we're interviewing them for is more spontaneous than a canned answer. And like getting to learn people's mindset comes from how they respond to some of those moments as well. And we've learned that the people who can roll with our questions that are a little off, they'll even say like, wow, I was definitely not expecting you to ask me that. But then they do a great job answering it because it's more relaxed and it's less rehearsed.
So during that interview process, do you look at nonverbal cues at all from the candidate? What kind of takeaway do you get from the non-word answers?
So just the general posture. So if somebody looks like they actually want to be there, whether it's sitting up, whether it's just a smile, whether actually focusing on eye contact, if they look at the person who asked him the question. So I sometimes have a panel that I get to interview with. And so if they just focus in on that one person versus looking at the room, and just the general energy that you can see in their eyes of whether or not they're actually excited to be there. And one thing that I've picked up on a lot with some of these is people who are running away from a job versus running towards your job. So if you're in that room, you clearly are pursuing the job. But having the candidates be in the mindset of, I really don't want to do what I'm currently doing, or I really want to do what I'm interviewing for. That I can pick up on by the way they respond, by the way the energy in their face, whether they smile when I ask them questions, things like that.
I like that idea. Either you're running away and trying to get away from something for a job, or you're really running towards something because you want to have it. And you can pick up on the difference during the interview. What would you say are some red flags that show up during the interview?
So again, looking at mindset, like we've talked about with a couple of points here, having people who are in that fixed mindset of, they speak negatively of where they used to work or a team member that they used to work with, or when we talk about leadership. So when I'll ask people sometimes, like, what does great leadership look like to you? If they talk negatively about their previous leader. So it's really just that fixed mindset of kind of being stuck in the past a little bit, and not so much the do behaviors that, that we actually look for. So in the sense of like, what does a great something look like not telling me the negative stuff. Mm-hmm. And so if you're negative in that environment, and if you're willing to speak negatively about them, you're probably going to be willing to speak negatively about anybody on our team if it doesn't go exactly how you thought it would. And for us, managing up, speaking highly about each other is key. It's actually one of our behaviors. It's one of our actual things that we talk about. Every single employee, all 5,000 employees will tell you, managing up is one of the things that we do so that the peers know that we support and we value them, but also the patients. The patients can pick up on whether or not the culture within the team is healthy, and that's based on how we talk about each other.
Yeah, again, you're hiring somebody who wants to be there, wants to engage in some hard situations at times, and it not be a burden to them. It's something that they actually get energy from. That's a hard skill to find. We've been talking about your interview questions, and you have the great one for optimism and pessimism. Do you have any other back pocket questions that you pull out every time, and it's a surefire way to figure out, is this person going to be what we need them to be in the role we're hiring them for?
Yeah, so one of my new favorite questions is to ask people personally or professionally, what are they currently working on to grow themselves? And then also in their career, if they have, a pretty substantial career, again, some of the physicians and PhDs, what are they purposely working on in their career so that they can recognize growth within themselves? Because what we don't look for are people who feel like they know everything they need to know before they come into our environment. So where admitting that you don't know everything is actually a strength on our team, because our day changes every day. Our teams change all the time. And we need to be able to be flexible enough in our mindset to have that growth mindset, to be able and willing to learn and actually be proud that we're learning and growing. And so that question has actually led us to see what they're doing before they come into our team.
Now, you want to know people are learning. You want to know that they're engaged in becoming better than what they are today.
Yeah, and people that are only trying to tell you what they already know, right? So we're never really able to learn something that of which we already think we know. we can learn something every day. I personally learn something every single day. But I just have the mindset of I'm excited about learning. I'm not threatened by not knowing everything.
So TJ, you have people from all walks of life coming to you to try to find a job, a career. I like to use that word better. It's more than just a job. It's a career. It's something you're passionate about. Where do you find your people?
So we have a couple different avenues that we use. So obviously, our HR team, like I said earlier, they do a great job of finding the right people. And one thing that I'd recommend to anybody who's interviewing anybody is have HR know exactly who you're looking for. Not what degree they have, but like what type of person are you looking for? So then they know what websites to go to post things, and then they also, when they interview that person on the phone, they kind of already have a good feel of like, yeah, no, it's probably not going to be a great fit for that team. But one of the things that we've done more than anything at MU Healthcare, especially the last 3 years, is word of mouth from our current employees. So we've been ranked one of the top 150 places to work. And that's pretty tough in a hospital. And so Becker's Hospital Review, which is a pretty prominent review, the word of mouth and our own team members recruiting more team members is the best recruiting tool that we have because they know the reality of the job, not what it shows online.
Something that you mentioned to me earlier before we even started this podcast, TJ, was the environment that you work in. You want people to know what that is really like. How do you do that? So you're trying to recruit people, but at the same time, you want to paint a very real picture of the environment people are stepping into.
Yeah, and out of respect to the candidate too, they deserve to know what environment they're really interviewing to be in and what team and what dynamics and those kind of things. And so, in the sense of even if the interviewer doesn't give you that opportunity to learn that, I would say as a candidate, ask the real questions. Ask, not implying that they're lying to you, but just ask the questions of, so when this team is stressed, like how does everybody come together? Because that team's probably stressed if they're busy, and clearly they're stressed because they have you in that room, so they're down a team member. So you can assume that things aren't ideal in the environment. Now, you may be a new addition, which means they're busy, which means they still need you. So ask the questions of, how does the team respond, with adversity or something, or how do we handle change management on this team? Just ask the real questions. But again, as the interviewer, having the candidate have the impression that they're interviewing for a slow-paced, very relaxed, autonomous environment, and then when they get in there, it's fast-paced, stressful, and micromanaged environment, you're actually doing a disservice to both of you because neither one of you are going to be happy in that situation. So being honest with candidates lately for us, because of, we are recruiting for people all the time, we're growing at a rapid rate. But they actually show more gratitude for just saying like, wow, I'm really grateful that you are willing to tell me that how things are really going, as opposed to painting this picture that we want the candidate to think. But the candidates have been more candid with their answers back because we've been actually able to say, so if you were in this environment, because this is our current environment, how would you come in and make a difference with our team? That's real. And they're drawing back on examples of how they made a difference on their team. So instead of painting this hypothetical picture, you just give them the real picture. They'll give you a real answer right back.
So TJ, as you're asking your questions of the candidates and you have the various types of questions you're asking, what types of responses that you receive from the candidates are the types of responses that make one stand out over another?
So I think the responses that stand out for me more than anything with a positive response is they'll give an example of the actual response. And the negative responses are typically that one sentence, one word. And then when I ask more questions about it, they actually repeat that negative one sentence, one word. But the positive responses that separate it, and then when they actually come back with a question to me, so whenever I ask them about maybe a work environment question for them, they would then fire back a question to me about, so well, you just asked me about what type of environment I like to work in. So tell me about what type of work environment this is here. So it's much more conversational because the point of an interview is, again, to get to know somebody, not to interrogate somebody. So being able to ask questions freely whenever you feel like that's something that matters to you. So if you ask me about work culture, I know it matters to you, obviously. But having us be back on the, if you will, the hot seat, right? Interviews aren't supposed to be that stressful, but that is really one of the more positive responses that I get from people is when they ask more of an in-depth question back to me based on what I ask them.
TJ, how accurate do you think a person's resume lines up with the person that actually walks through the door?
So again, with the resources available for candidates, for just people these days, to make a resume look a certain way, we look at the resume to see if what type of language is used. Not necessarily, we know the school piece. Again, we talked about that already. We know the school piece, we know the technical piece. So the language used on a resume is super, super important for us because, again, we're looking for a certain mindset. And if you're willing to type it before we ask you the question, we already know the mindset's there before you feel like you should have it in the same room with us. Now, at the same time, we also have people that come in and say that they are people focused and they love to serve people. And then when we're in the interview, they don't sound anything like that. I actually call people out on that because I want to give them the fair shot. Because if they're nervous in the interview, I don't want that to be the only perception. And so that's something that I've then said, so it looks like here on your resume that you love to serve people. So tell me about an opportunity that you've done that, and like how does that make you feel when you serve people? If I feel like the two aren't matching. We had a candidate that said she was an absolute rock star. Everybody loved her. She was fantastic at everything. Her team couldn't do it without her. And I asked her for examples. Like, tell me, like, why are you leaving that team? Right? And she answered back, perfect answer. She said, I love my team. I just really want to grow. And the team supporting me. You can call my boss right now. She would say that I am everything on this piece of paper. And so as an interviewer, like asking those questions of like, back it up, right? Because then you don't get fooled whenever you actually hire them. And I think the thing that candidates should have to make them more confident, even though a story may sound similar to someone else, no two stories are the same. So your story is your story. It's not a story. So that's why we're asking the questions, because we want to hear about you, not just about a hypothetical example of when you've done something. And so like be confident in that, because then we'll be able to understand more about you and not being so focused on whether or not you performed in the right way in that moment or whatever it might be whenever you're trying to tell a story about how you've done something well, but just make it unique to you and be humble. Because again, we don't want people to feel like they're the best at everything. We want people to feel like they're getting better at everything.
Interviewing people, all walks of life, I'm guessing that it's probably good for them to come in with some pre-knowledge prior to the interview. Is that something you look for?
It is something we look for, and it's something that is a very important thing for us to understand, because if you've already started investing in our organization, our company, whatever it may be, before you even walk in the door, it shows the level of commitment that you have even before you have the potential job. Plus, it also shows that you actually know who we are and you're still interested in that. And so our culture is one of the things that we continue to work on, continue to grow, continue to see every single day in our environment. So we've had candidates come in and say, so I was on the website, I saw this, or I saw one of your commercials. Tell me about this culture of yes. Tell me what it really means. How does it feel as an employee here to be a part of that culture? That is one of those questions back to us that realizes like that's somebody that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. So again, running to you rather than away from something, spending the time digging into what your culture is. Not so much what you have to offer them, but what is your culture and how can they fit into your culture to help you guys succeed?
We've had some great candidates who've actually used our culture in an answer. So the 4 values of our culture are care, deliver, innovate, and serve. And we have behaviors associated to all of those. Every single one of our employees knows those. So if you ask a question about that culture and you actually use the words how you would care, how you would deliver, we kind of get to feel how you would fit into our team.
So TJ, tell me, are there some things that happen during the interview that you think prevent candidates from actually presenting their best selves, like putting their best foot forward?
This is going to sound simple. If they're not comfortable in what they're wearing, if they don't feel great in what they're wearing or how they look that day, whatever it may be. So put on the outfit the day before. Wear it for a minute. How do you feel in it? Because you're going to feel and give off that energy. And so we've had some people who've come in and you can just tell they're uncomfortable and they're hot, they're uncomfortable and it's itchy, whatever it may be. And like you almost feel bad for them because anytime you're in an interview, you're going to be stressed.
Yeah, totally stressful.
And so getting to the point where you can relax with us is the key. And so I use icebreakers all the time. I ask people, what do you love to do when you're not at work? Just so that they get a chance to be a normal person for a second. And our team's mindset is we are people first and employees second. That's all we're trying to do because you're not an employee with us yet. You're just a human that we're interested in who clearly might be a good fit for our team. What we do is important, but who we get to do it with is the most important thing. Out of service to our team, the candidates that we look at, the candidates that we get to interview, the who is what we're impacting for them. Our job as interviewers is to figure out who is going to be the best fit. We're not trying to find the same person over and over and over again. So you may sound different than the others. It's complementing each other. That really is the strength of a team. Not having all the same strengths, but diversifying the strengths of our team because everybody offers something unique.
TJ, thank you so much for coming in today. I appreciate your time.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. I'm excited to see how this continues to grow and how you impact lives with this.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Glass of Water. We hope you were able to pull a few bits or nuggets of helpful information. And hey, remember that regardless of where you are in your career search, it's not about what you do that matters. It's about who you are. TJ, thanks for coming in. Could I get you anything to drink?
Yeah, how about a glass of water?